Holy Spirit. Amen. Please be seated. I found out last night there's an ongoing wager going if I will hit the candle or not when I'm preaching. So if you haven't got your wager yet, please hurry up and do so before I get started. This is time of all saints, the time that we recognize our saints that have gone before us and those who are coming to us this morning. It reminds me of a story that I read a long time ago. It's a beautiful story and I loved it for several reasons. But it was a story about a father and a son, and they were at a cathedral. And there they were looking at statues and architecture, and he was explaining some of this as they were walking along. And then they came to the stained glass windows, and they were on the western side, and he began to tell his son the stories as they would walk up to different ones. One was God creating the universe, and he was telling the story of Genesis. The reason it grabbed my attention is because I absolutely love that people still do this. You understand that stained glass windows were not made to just be pretty, but it was at a time in our early church before a lot of people could read. That a family could come in, a father or a mother, and look at the picture and tell their children the story. That's what they were made for, and for me it caught my attention because once again, this man is continuing this beautiful, beautiful tradition with his son. And so they go and they see the beginnings of the heavens and the earth, and then they walk down a little more and they see Noah's Ark. And they start talking, the little boy knows a lot about Noah's Ark, and they started to talk about that. Then they saw another, and it had Moses standing with the Ten Commandments, and he's telling him about the Ten Commandments, and Moses being up there, and that these were God's laws. And they continue to walk down until finally they see the manger, the nativity scene, and there's Joseph and Mary and the baby in swaddling clothes in the manger, and he tells them more about that. And they walk and they see, of course, him being a teen in front of the elders in the temple. And they go on, and there's the Last Supper, and he's telling them about the disciples and how this was the Last Supper, and telling them about Judas and all that fun stuff. And then there's the crucifix. And then, of course, is the open and empty tomb. And he tells them about salvation and how Jesus came to save us. They walk from the western side to the eastern side, and both of them started to feel a little warmer as they're coming, and all that light coming on their faces. And the father and the son both sat there and they kind of laughed with each other because they could see the colors of the windows on their faces as the bright sun shined through it. They started laughing about it, and they're going up, and along this particular wall was a line of saints. And so he wanted to tell him some about the saints. And of course, they started out with the disciples and the different ones that were going down. And so he's telling them about this one, and John, and James, and Simon. And finally, the little boy asked him, well, why does that one have keys? And he said, well, that's Peter. And Peter has the keys because Jesus gave him the keys to the kingdom of heaven. And it's like, okay. And they continued to the next one. And finally, the little boy said, well, Dad, I have a question. What makes someone a saint? What makes a person a saint? And the father was a little embarrassed because he thought to himself, well, I'm giving him all this information, but how do I answer that? And so he began to kind of pray, like, Lord, please help me here. And so he ignored the little boy a little bit, and they went down a few more, and he's telling them about Peter and, about John and all of that. And finally the little boy said, I've got another question. And he's looking at his dad and seeing the colors on his face and seeing the colors on his own skin and everything. And he said, Dad, does the sun always shine through the saints? And the dad started to chuckle, and he's like getting ready to explain, well, we're on the eastern side of the building as the sun is, coming up, and so that's what you're seeing. But all of a sudden he stopped. And he thought to himself, wow, I think my son just answered his own question. He said, yes, son, as a matter of fact, the sun does always shine through the saints. Not the S-U-N, the S-O-N. The Son of God shines through the saints. And once he said that, it opened up what saints are to him. He said, son, the saints are just like you and I. They're normal human beings in this world. They've done good things. Some of them have done bad things. Some of them have been faithful. Many of them and all of them were sinners. He even told them a little, for a great example is, I always say, read the Confessions of St. Augustine. He'll tell you, this is a guy who cried at his ordination. He sobbed at his ordination because he knew that he couldn't go out and have the fun parties he used to have, and he couldn't be with the women that he loved, and they seemed to love him. And he was very upset about it. He was a person. He was a human being. And so he tells his son, he said, they're all human beings, just like you and I. The one thing about saints is they allow the Son of God to shine through them. In other words, whether they fall or whatever they do, the thing is people can see God at work through them. And he looked at his father and he said, well, does that mean we're saints? And he said, yes, son, it does. Allow God to shine through you. I thought about that particular story when I was reading the gospel today, because if you think about it, this is what we have going on. We all know the story. I don't know about you, but I remember this from when I was in Sunday school, right? Lazarus, of course. I remember all the boys, we thought it was so cool because he's all wrapped up and he stunk, and we thought that was great. And, and we'd all try to hop, and be like he was going to be. And so we all know the story. We know the story actually is a little further back than the gospel said today, and that is Jesus was in another city, another town. And somebody came to tell him that, hey, Lazarus is sick, really sick. And he said, okay, thank you. And so they stayed. And finally somebody says to him again, hey, you know what? He's really sick. And he tells the disciples, he said, no, Lazarus is not sick. Lazarus has died. And so they finally get up and they go to the next town. And we all know that they tell Mary and Martha, the rabbi is here. And they come and they run out. And it's Mary. They have such great faith. And we know that this relationship is very deep between Jesus and this particular family. And she runs out to him, and already she wants to show her faith. And she says, oh, Lord, had you been here, I know that my brother would not have died. And he looks at her, and he said, didn't I tell you that if you believe, if you really believe, you will see the glory of God before you? She said, yes. He sees her weeping. He sees the people with her weeping. And I love this. It moves Jesus. Think about that. The God himself in the flesh coming, and he's moved by our grief. And he says, take me to him. And they take him to the tomb. And there he looks and he starts to pray before them. And they say, even the people say, wow, look how moved he is. He must have loved him so much. And of course, you know that not everybody in our humanness can allow it just to lay there, right? Then you've got the other half saying, well, if he could take care of the blind man, why did he take care of him if he cared about it so much? Always a critic. But Jesus, again, is moved by this. And he begins to pray to God before them. And he says, I'm not praying on my behalf. I'm praying for all of them. I know that you always hear me. And he prays, and then he says, remove the stone. And Martha, the other sister, comes to him and says, oh, Lord, you don't want to do that. It's been 4 days already, and there's a stench. Jesus knows what this is. Jesus understands the process of what's going on. He says, remove the stone. Oh, I don't know if you really want to do that. It's going to be bad. Remove the stone. And they do. They remove the stone. And again, in the glory of God, Jesus says, Lazarus, come out. And Lazarus comes, tied in his burial cloth, and even one across his face. And Jesus says to the people, untie him, unbind him, and set him free. Set him free from the cloth, as well as free him from the sting of death. What stood before them after they unclothed him was a saint. What stood before him is one who allows the sun to shine through him. In other words, because of Lazarus, People can see him as an example of God's love in this world. Because of Lazarus, people saw an example of the miracle of God. Because of Lazarus, people saw the miracle of removing death from all of us and resurrection. You see, he's allowing the sun to shine through him. And I've often thought, can you imagine years after Lazarus is still walking around, how a father can take his son on the road and say, there he is. There he is. Years ago, I was there. Years ago, I saw that man raised from the dead because of Jesus. I saw God's love for us. I saw him beat death. I've seen resurrection. Imagine over the years mothers taking their daughters and saying, there he is. There's the one that I told you about. There he is, the living example of what God does for all of us. You see, Lazarus allows the sun to shine through him and becomes an example of the people around him. My question this morning is, does the sun shine through you? Not the S-U-N, the S-O-N. Does the Son of God shine through you? In other words, are you an example to people around you of Jesus Christ himself? Do we show God's mercy? Do we show others God's love? Do we show God's miracles? If we don't, why not? After all, everyone who's sitting here is a child of God. Everyone who is sitting here is a saint. You may say, wait a minute, I'm not perfect, neither am I. And neither were any of the other saints. But what we have to do as children of God and being saints, we have a responsibility to Jesus Christ himself, and that is to allow him to shine through our lives. To be a hope to other people. To be a hope to other people in bringing them to God. In other words, if we are truly God's children and we are saints, do we worship as God's children? You better believe it, but we can shine even more. Do we pray for others? You better believe it. But in our lives we can shine even more. Do we give to the church and to our community? You better believe it, but we can shine even more. Do we bring people to God and help those who are broken? You better believe it, but we can shine even more. Why? Because we have it, Jesus Christ, who is worth it and can shine through us, because there is no stopping the power of God. During this time of All Saints, we're celebrating, like I said, those who have gone before us, those who are in the community of heaven, as well as those who are being baptized and coming into our community. We need to remember that we are something bigger than ourselves. That we are a part of a community of saints. And so therefore we need to think about ourselves, not only ourselves being a shining beacon to people, but our church too. Our community coming together. And I want us to make Holy Trinity a beacon of hope to people in this community. I want those who are hungry to be fed. I want those who are naked that we can help clothe. I want those who are broken to know that they can come through these doors and know God is here. I want us to be able to bring people to God who are seeking for something bigger than themselves, are seeking answers. We are part of something so large, each and every one of us. And we have a God who loves each and every one of you. So shine. Shine for Jesus Christ. Let people see Jesus through you. After all, you're a saint. Amen.